Welcome to Horror Makes Us Happy, the podcast where we ask the question, what is it about horror that makes us happy? Your hosts are Chris Whitman, myself, and Steve Becker. And you can find out more about us at our website, horrormakesushappy.com. Today's guest is Martin Trafford. He's best known for being an illustrator and graphic artist, and under the website moniker Traffart. Welcome, Martin. How you doing today?
Hi. I'm good. Yeah.
Before we get started, is there anything that you're currently working on or anything you want to plug?
Yeah, I've usually got a few things on the go at once. So, I mean, at the moment, we're promoting through Cult Epics. I've collaborated on a limited VHS box set of Jörg Buttgereit's Der Todesking. So that's been flogged at the moment. Very limited edition. I've done a bunch of art prints for it, so it's looking pretty. Mm-hmm. I'm also currently working with Anthony Cotter on the next Sharp Knives comic, and working with a production company called Vile Video Productions on currently a release of my friend René Weisner's short Mondo movies called Pulp Films. Mm-hmm. So that's due out this month.
Wow. Yeah. Nice.
And I think that's it at the moment. I get confused.
Well, that's all. Just those 5 things.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that Jörg also did Der Todesking. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Der Todesking. Yeah, The Death King. Yeah, great movie.
And apparently directed Lex. Nice.
Oh yes, yeah, an episode of Lex. Yeah, and I think he was in an episode as well, briefly.
This appears to be a Lex reboot. No, it's the same people. Okay, good God, that's...
Yeah, because I think that was a German-Canadian collaboration, I think. Lex the Dark Soul, yeah.
Just remember that from...
I don't know, I've slept since then, but
yeah.
as far as I recall.
Quite a while since I've seen any of that show.
Oh, hell yes, yeah. When was that? Early 90s?
I think so. I know it was in the same era as things like Red Dwarf and Space Above and Beyond. Just good old 90s sci-fi space TV show.
Yeah, classics.
I'll say it. Our TV sucks.
Can't have sex, but killing people is quite all right.
Exactly. Gratuitous violence. Speaking of graphic things and things of that nature, before we get started, a little information for you and for the listeners. Here are your trigger warnings. We're going to be talking about horror movies or horrific things, which could involve anything from murder, rape, suicide, child abuse. There will be F-bombs. So that's not something you're prepared for. Please take a moment and maybe come back and join us when you're ready to hear F words like fuck. I said it.
And I'll say it again.
Fuck. Also feck. All right, so in this interview, we're going to be asking 3 sets of questions covering your childhood, teenage years, and adulthood to find out what it is exactly about horror that you liked or liked at the time, what influenced you, also what things about horror you maybe didn't like or scared you at the time. We're coming at the questions from multiple angles because sometimes it triggers different memories, like something you may not have mentioned in childhood. You're in the middle of adolescence and you're like, oh yeah, there was that one thing that scared the ever-living shit out of me when I was a child. Forgot about that. So it's an interesting take on the whole thing. That being said, though, this is not meant to be a therapy session, so if you don't want to answer any questions, you can just say pass. We'll move on past it.
Okay.
Right then. All right. So starting up with childhood, what are some of the earliest memories you have of scary things or scary stories, films, or anything that maybe inspired you or scared you when you were a kid?
In the early 80s, I think about 82 or something, is when the whole VHS boom happened. So my mother bought a VHS player and rented out the first 2 VHS, and we were all very excited. And she rented out for us kids some Donald Duck cartoon thing, and also rented out a movie called Dead and Buried. So Dead and Buried was later one of the infamous video nasties when all that kicked off in the UK. But I always remember the opening scene of Dead and Buried is a guy on a beach taking photographs. A pretty girl comes up to him and he starts taking pictures of the girl, and then within seconds, there's a horrible turnaround, and she's throwing the net over him, and they're pouring. All the villagers turn up, they pour gasoline on him and set fire to him. And my tiny mind couldn't get around why that lady, the pretty lady, was so nasty. What the hell was actually going on? It was very confusing for me, and I couldn't wrap my head around it at all. And I told her to switch it off. We couldn't watch it any further. But that scene, for me, is a very vivid early memory of feeling real horror, of feeling scared and confused by something.
I would say so. Yeah, watching a man get set on fire when you're 6 is quite an experience.
Yeah.
Especially if you've had no preparation,
Yeah, going from a Donald Duck cartoon to that, it was a bit jarring.
Leading off with that, what was the first thing that really scared you? Well, we had this Donald Duck cartoon.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time that anybody mentioned classic cartoons scaring them as a child. I forgot who it was, but one of our former guests said, was it Ratatouille or something with crows? Some early Disney film, just because the villains were so overly animated and...
Oh, I know what you're talking about, and it's on the tip of my tongue, too.
Rockadoodle. That was it.
I think you looked it up, and you thought it was Rockadoodle, and he wasn't sure whether or not there was the same movie.
Yeah.
Oh, saying that, yeah, Watership Down. I saw that at a young age, and that fucked me up for a while. That's not a kid.
It is not. I recently was told by my mother that she showed that to us when I was a kid, and I have no recollection of that movie, so it must have been that traumatic that I just blocked it out. Like, I've seen it now since, but I was just talking with my family the other day, and my mom's like, "Oh yeah, I showed you that when you were kids." What? I don't remember this. I think I would have remembered rabbits getting slaughtered.
Or you just weren't paying attention. You're playing with your toys.
Yeah, that was probably it. Maybe that's why she didn't care that a child was watching it. Like, he's got Transformers. He's fine. He's fine.
Acting out your own horrors with the Transformers.
So, Dead and Buried, Watership Down. What else?
Yeah. And going back to the VHS thing, my mother used to record old Hammer Horror and Universal movies when they were on in the UK at sort of 3 or 4 in the morning. The one that stuck with me probably the most was the Monster Club.
Mm-hmm.
Vincent Price, and it's kind of a comedy horror. There's a lot of whimsy involved in that movie. But there was one section. I don't think each section had a name, but I just remember it. The Whistler, this creepy guy that when he whistled, he had a high-pitched whistle, and organic matter around him would melt. So he sort of whistled at a cat and completely melted this cat, and then
that's a hell of a
I
whistle.
think the story culminates with him whistling at a woman, and you don't see what happens to the woman. I don't think that idea of simply being able to whistle and completely melt something. That was pretty horrific for me as well. And I remember being very confused by there's that sort of half animated scene where a woman's stripping, which is a real footage of this woman on the stage stripping in this club that they're in. But then when she gets down to her underwear, it sort of goes to silhouette, and she peels her arms off and all of her skin, and then she's just a dancing skeleton. And that kind of fascinated me. There's a pretty girl taking her clothes off and all, but when it got down to stripping her skin and viscera off and down to a dancing skeleton, that idea really
It's funny, the way that's delivered. It's almost like that's one of the questions that we kind of try to get to the core of with these interviews is, what is it that entices people into horrific things or them dark and macabre? But that's almost like a direct way of engineering that, because you have the sexy and seductive attraction, which smoothly slides into horrific, and before you know it, you're just like, I like this too.
Well, that was kind of a common trope in some of the cartoons, because I'd never seen that movie, but I can think of at least 1 or 2 cases where the cartoons would do something exactly like that. It was a striptease, but the joke was that you were going to strip off everything, including your skin as well as the clothing.
Okay, yeah, more of a cartoony version of it, less blood, muscles, and viscera. Just the skin comes off, and it's like clothing, and there's a cartoon skeleton underneath it.
Right. Well, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what happens in the movie. Yeah. You don't see blood dripping or anything, quite as creative as that. But yeah, peeling off the skin and muscles, like the arms, degloving them. Yeah, but yeah, that really stuck with me. And I mean, as far as literature and things, when I was a kid, I used to collect Scream comics, and that's what also got me interested in drawing the Scream comics. Because I used to redraw panels of that.
Was Scream the name of the comic? Or
Scream was the name of the comic. It was a British comic. There were only 14 issues, and then, the rumour is it was banned because it was far too scary for children. But it was absolutely fantastic. I've later gone on to collect all the issues again. It's a little bit like sort of Tales from the Crypt style, almost like Creepshow. And I think it probably came out about the same time as Creepshow, actually. Thinking about it.
I don't know, just looking pictures up on it. It looks similar to like Archie Bunker almost. The Scream comics that I found anyway. But I'm not surprised to hear that you were a fan of things like Creepshow and Tales from the Crypt, because it definitely shows in your work. That was a compliment.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'll take that. Yeah, no, that inspired me greatly as a kid. And speaking of art, going back to the VHS thing again, just being in 80s VHS stores, pre-Video Nasty era, it used to blow my mind. I'd be one of the kids that would spend hours just staring at the covers of the VHS, and then I went on to hassling the store owners to give me old posters and things.
Nice.
Yeah, through that I discovered the art of Graham Humphreys, and I'm still a big fan to this day of Graham. He's such a nice guy as well. I've chatted with him a few times, but he did the original VHS art in the UK for the Evil Dead.
Really?
The Nightmare on Elm Street 1 and 2. In fact, I think we did a bunch of Nightmare on Elm Street covers.
Okay. Yeah, I know this man's work. I just didn't know I knew it. And
yeah, well, but this is it, because it was everywhere back in the day. And his work was a big influence on me. So I used to get the VHS trade magazines to show you what's coming soon, etc. And there was always a ton of his work in there. I'd just sit as a child and draw it and redraw it and try and get my head around his line work and the way he put things down. And yeah, he's still amazing. The man's still amazing.
Nice. So we've got Dead and Buried, Hammer Horror, Monster Club, Whistler, Watership Down, Scream comics, and movie posters.
Yeah, movie posters. Oh, and there was a TV series called Arthur C. Clarke's World of Strange Powers that I used to love. And that would go into sort of weekly episodes, and 1 week it might be telepathy, ESP, the next week aliens, the next week ghosts. And I was fascinated by ghosts and the supernatural as a child. The unseen, the unknown. I guess as a child, what's lurking in the shadows kind of deal. And there was one episode in particular where it went into the Enfield poltergeist, which I think has recently been made as one of the Conjuring movies. The Conjuring 2, I think, was based on that. But that being based in the UK, and people that were in similar circumstances to me and my family, sort of in a council house, single mother, that really stuck with me. And there was a little section where they were playing recordings of a sort of seance they'd done with the little girl that the haunting was centered on. And they taped her mouth shut and put water in her mouth, and they recorded this voice of the old guy that was haunting the place coming from her, and that terrified me to the core when I heard it. But I was also really fascinated by it.
What was it that scared you about it?
It was the fact that there was no way it could have been faked. They sort of taped her up and everything, and the fact it was an old man's voice coming from this teenager, well, not even a teenage girl, she was prepubescent, I think, 12 years old or something. And again, it's sort of evidence of something other, something else in the background, another world, another plane of existence.
So, what was it that fascinated you about this other plane of existence?
I think the fact as a child, you're very aware of yourself and your own surroundings and how you're based and where you fit into things. You're still trying to figure all that out, but it's very immediate, so you're very aware of it. When you then become aware of something else which seems completely fantastical and not something you would ever think of, that adults are talking about, it sort of triggers the fantastical in your brain, I guess, and you sort of start thinking, well, this must be real. If these people are talking about this, it must be real. And that at once terrified me and excited me greatly to think that there was something other than physical and the things around you. I went on to have a couple of strange experiences with the supernatural myself.
You want to tell us about them?
You want to hear about them? Yeah.
Was it in childhood or adolescence?
Yeah. Childhood. Yeah. Verging on adolescence, I guess.
I'll allow it.
10, 11 years old. One of the major ones was I used to visit with my family. So we used to go camping a lot every few weeks. So we go to a little seaside village called Whitby in the UK. And Whitby has a great history in that's where Bram Stoker wrote Dracula. The book, when the ship arrives that's holding Dracula's coffin, it arrives in Whitby. So there's this whole sort of goth culture in Whitby as well. It's a very old village, cobbled streets and tiny doors and everything. It's still pretty much as it was back in the day. But they have a ghost walk as well. Being such an old town and attracting this kind of phenomena, they do ghost tours, so they take you around the town and tell you the stories. But before I'd actually been on this tour, I went to, it was a wax museum at the time. What was it called? White Horse Inn, I think it was called. But at the time I went with a friend of mine, we went to visit a wax museum. There was nobody else in there. It was just me and my friend. And yeah, we must have been 10, 11 years old. And wax museums are spooky anyway. But it was on several floors, about five floors maybe. But anyway, we got up to the one floor, which was sort of a Charles Dickens exhibition. They had the Great Expectations figures and things. And I walked past a little section of wall that had a kind of a burlap sack nailed to something. It looked like there was something behind this sack, so I lifted it up, and there was a little window in the wall, which was hollowed out. And when you looked in there, it was kind of a very strange spiral staircase. Just in this tiny little space, there was a staircase going up somewhere, and there was an old chandelier there that looked like it had been there centuries. And as soon as I did this, I got this overwhelming fear, what I can only describe as dread, really. It was really, really very scary. I could feel it. It just came on like a wave all of a sudden. And the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, and I was starting to tear up. I was so scared, and I turned around and looked at my friend, and without saying a word, he was in tears, and he said, "We've got to get out of here." So we both ran down the stairs, terrified, and on the way out by the desk where you pay your admission fee, there were newspaper clippings on the wall of some ghost hunter that had stayed there the night and the history of the place. And we just said to the owner, "Look, something just happened to us. We were up there." And while we were talking, they had a dog. There was nobody else in the building, and the dog was barking up the stairs where we'd just been. So the owner went on to tell us that this place is haunted by an old smuggler, an old pirate, and they used to use these hidden staircases in the walls and things to smuggle goods. And there was a trapdoor outside the back where some wench girl had fallen down and died. And apparently the pirate's legs have been seen walking around in the Chamber of Horrors. It was just so fantastical. But rather than being terrified, I then felt kind of honoured in a way that I had a peek into something else that not many people do experience. And then I have another story. You want to hear another story?
Just to sum that one up real quick. So you, when you looked in the window, there was a spiral staircase and a chandelier. Was there anything paranormal or anything in the window, or was it just that sheer feeling of dread that kind of approached you from inside the window?
Yeah, basically just the feeling of dread, just like a wave crashing into you. And there was no reason for me to feel that way. I wasn't feeling particularly scared or anything. Mm-hmm. I was just being a nosy kid. If there's a curtain, I'm going to peek under it and see what's there. And it was almost as if, this pirate had, this malevolent force had said, no, this is my hidey hole. You shouldn't be looking in here.
Something in that window said, fuck off.
Exactly, yeah.
So what was the other experience?
Oh, yeah, the other experience. Now, this was in a little town called Huddersfield in Yorkshire, where I'm from.
Did you say Pottersfield?
I'd gone there. Huddersfield.
Yeah, I heard Pottersfield too.
Huddersfield, yeah. And we'd gone to it was a surprise birthday party for a friend of my dad's. And I was one of the only kids that was going to be there. We'd gone to this place, which was an old youth hostel. And it was called the Phoenix because the place had actually burnt down previously, and then they rebuilt and named it the Phoenix. But it was an adult party, so the party was going on the one level, and I was sent downstairs to the basement level, where there was a TV and a pool table and various things. And then when I'd gone down there was only one staircase to get up or down, and I could see that through the door of the room I was in. So anybody coming up or down I would have seen. And I had a little look around down there, and to the left side of the door there was a changing room, and to the right side there was a sports hall, an exercise hall. And I'd noticed when I went in the changing rooms that somebody had left a pair of braces on a hook, and that was the only thing in there, which is why I'd noticed it. But I was waiting in the other room watching the TV because I knew that a couple of other friends of my father's friends were bringing their kids, and then they joined me downstairs. And while I was sat there, about an hour or two had passed, and it was deathly quiet down there, and I could hear rattling from the changing room, and it sounded like somebody basically twanging on the braces that were on the hook in there. So I thought, oh, they're here, they've snuck down, they're trying to frighten me. I'll get them. So I was staring at the door waiting for them to come in, and it sounds cliche, but what I saw was sort of a white figure with its arm out just shoot up the staircase. And it was so fast it barely registered. But I thought, well, okay, someone's been down and they're messing around and they've gone back up. Later, it transpired that the other kids didn't turn up, so I was then invited upstairs to the adults' party, and they were drinking and dancing, and the daughter of the guy the party was for had a white pullover on.
Okay.
So I thought, well, she had a white pullover on, it must have been her that was down there messing around. And we all settled down to sort of sleep for the night. We all had sleeping bags, and we were going to crash there overnight, so we had the place to ourselves. And then as we were settling down, she said, don't let the ghost get you. And with that, my hair stood up on the back of my head, and I just felt complete and utter fear for a moment. And I had to ask her, I said, what do you mean the ghost? And I said, did you go downstairs earlier? Was that you? And she's like, no, that'll be the ghost. And apparently it was the old caretaker had been in the building when it went up in flames. So they say it's that guy was haunting the place. And then she told me a story of her and her friends had all camped out in the sports hall area downstairs one night, and they'd all woken each other up, and they were all collectively watching a white figure walking around and around inside the sports hall. So that was pretty terrifying. But again, after the fear came that sort of elation that I saw a ghost. Yeah, so that was that. But again, it's that sort of that feeling of it's scary, but you feel safe afterwards because it's already happened and there was nothing you could do about it. So yeah.
Yeah, it's like a lot of or a common thread we've seen in another one of the questions, which is, did you ever have anything happen at this phase of your life that actually terrified you, which we've kind of already covered inadvertently a couple of times. But I heard it a couple of times that it's always something in retrospect, like that thing of, oh, I could have died. Or you don't think about the fear of it at the time, but looking back on it, you realize the danger that you were in.
Absolutely. So sorry, I've probably taken up about an hour with those, haven't I?
Oh yeah, there was a lot of preamble, and we're only in childhood.
Yeah, buckle up.
So, looking at the notes I wrote here about the different items, I think the only one that you said you were legitimately horrified by, other than the two stories you just shared, was the Dead and Buried movie.
Understandably.
Yeah. Everything else, it was sort of a mixture of some fear and excitement.
Yeah.
And so far, the main thing I've heard you say about the excitement was that you're fascinated by the idea of there being another plane, either another plane of existence or real things out there in the world that you hadn't experienced yet yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the questions we normally ask here is whether or not you had any friends or family who participated with you in watching these horror movies. You mentioned your mother had been taping the movies. So I'm guessing she was some sort of a bit of a horror fan herself?
She was. Yeah, she was a low-key horror fan. But she, she used to record these things and just, keep the kids quiet, sit down and watch that for an hour or two. But my dad was very much against, kids watching horror. The classification system was there for a reason.
He was more the conservative to your mom's liberal.
Yeah. So, and I think part of that, and knowing that my mother would sneakily let me watch them, or I'd go to friends' houses and they'd would sit and watch Nightmare on Elm Street and American Werewolf in London repeatedly. So it all sort of ties into that verboten aspect of, I'm not supposed to be doing this, but I am.
Okay. Yeah.
And that kind of illicit thrill that you get from doing something you're not really meant to do.
Forbidden fruit, as it were.
Yes.
So did your mother impart to you any sort of wisdom in relation to how to approach the subject material? Did she tell you that this stuff is just supposed to be for entertainment, or did she just let you watch it and get scared and say,
I think she was very, very clear. It's hard to recall properly, but I'm pretty sure she would have been very clear about the fact that it was all make-believe. It was all pretend, it's ketchup, But she would always say, if you get scared, switch it off. Which made me want to watch it all the more.
Why?
I guess because I wanted to see if I could sit through it.
It's a challenge.
Be scared and sit with
when your parents tell you,
exactly.
if you get scared, turn it off. You can't tell a child that and not expect them to rebel and say, well, I'm going to watch the whole thing now.
Exactly. But then, when you have friends that are also of the same age and you all know you shouldn't be watching something together, there's that sort of group mentality of, we'll all get together when the parents are out and we'll put one on and it'll be fun. And it usually was.
They didn't tease you? Did the older ones tease the younger ones, that kind of thing?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No, I don't remember being teased too much.
Did any of these experiences introduce any fears that you hadn't had before, or make you cause you to change your behavior in any way?
I wouldn't say I'd changed my behaviour because of them, but that I guess the main thought or the overriding emotion was the fear of people was creeping in more than the fear of the supernatural. I was sort of starting to gain a fear of people, of adults, of how malevolent and nasty some people can be.
Was that because of the Dead and Buried movie, or because of other experience you had in your childhood?
Probably a little of both.
Did you guys celebrate Halloween over there?
We did as kids, yeah. We used to get dressed up and go trick-or-treating with friends.
Do you have a favorite costume?
I didn't. My mother used to put makeup on us, and I remember once I wanted to be a zombie, so she got one of my stepfather's shirts, and we tore it up and covered it in blood, and it turned out it was his most expensive shirt that he was
Oops.
Yeah. But the deed was already done.
And it wasn't your fault. She made the costume, so you just...
Exactly. Absolved of all
I wonder,
guilt.
was that also your least favorite costume because of the aftermath, or did you have another costume that was least favorite just because being cumbersome or anything?
No, not that I remember. I think 1 year when I was very young, I was a crap vampire. And I didn't like that one. Yeah, too much makeup.
Did you not enjoy the process of getting dressed up, or was it you just were more focused on the candy?
I did enjoy more the process of being able to be weird for one night a year at least. Everyone else is doing it as well, so you don't sort of feel as odd.
Did you have any really scary dreams as a kid?
Yes, I used to have terrible nightmares, and I know in hindsight it's because I was a child of divorce and there was a lot of arguing in the house. But I used to have a recurring dream, which terrified me so much as a child that it's stuck with me through to adulthood. I don't have the dreams anymore, but I get a similar sort of feeling of dread occasionally, and sleep apnea, I guess. But I always remember, and this is through a child's mind, this dream, so it seems a little bit daft. But the first dream I had, I still vividly remember about this person. I lived in a house for some reason with this person that I would never see. I was aware that he or she or it was there, and that we used to share a bed together, and I was never allowed to look at the person. And in my dream, there was a conversation with a neighbour, and the neighbour said, "Oh, there's this really good rabbit movie on tonight," which was probably Watership Down. There's a good rabbit movie on tonight, and I know this person that you live with will really enjoy it. So I was like, oh yes, I'm going to have the bed to myself and I can spread out and relax and not be terrified that this person's going to be in there. So in my dream, I'd got into bed and then I sort of spread out, and then I was bitten on the hand. So this person was in the bed, hiding under the covers, and had waited for me to do this and then bitten me. But then it sort of went on through my dreams that it was a person with no face. A bit like Jacob's Ladder, and there's that guy with no face just shaking his head around. So it was this character that then would appear fairly often in my dreams.
Did it start off as just like a concept? Because it almost sounds like one of those dream-like things where you never actually see the person that you live with in this house that is there, but you never see them. Like you never even see them from behind and don't see their face. You just never see them, but just I don't know. I've noticed sometimes with dreams, you don't have to have any visual representation or even an object in the dream, but you just it's understood in your mind that this thing is this thing.
Yeah, exactly that.
And then over time, it started to manifest more into a person just with the Jacob's Ladder no face.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
Yeah. But it was. I know for a stage of months, it was nearly every night I was having dreams about this person, and I think that's why it's stuck with me to today, because it was probably a very formative time in my life, and I don't remember having nightmares before or after that. But for a long period there, I was having these recurring nightmares, and I was always terrified of putting your hands or feet outside the covers, pull the duvet right up over your head. Sure, it was a great time for my mother. Hearing me screaming for her every night.
Kid again.
Stop giving me cheese before bed.
Yeah, I can understand, as you say, being a child of divorce, and if there's, drama going on in the house, that, there can be a lot of fear associated with that. And like you say, to a child's mind, interpreting that symbolically as there being this thing that's going to hurt me if I touch it, so I don't want to go there. Yeah. So looking back then over the things that we've talked about for childhood here, if you were to summarize whether or not horror in your childhood made you happy, it sounds like the answer was more yes, because you did get to watch some movies that your mother had taped for you. You got to go experience some things over at your friend's place when you went to go over there. you mentioned these two experiences where, even though it scared you, you did say that you felt somewhat honored to have had the experience. So overall,
yeah, I'd say overall positive for sure. Yeah.
So what about teenage years? What were some of the stories or books or movies that were influential or even just impressed in your memory as being special?
Yeah, so definitely The Exorcist. That was a big one for me. Yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street movies. The first one really stuck with me. I was very impressed by that. That's Reanimator was a big one. I love Reanimator to this day. Return of the Living Dead. The Thing, The Stuff. Yeah, there were so many great movies.
That was a great one.
You know, being the 80s as well. Yeah, that was fantastic. I still love that. And I guess, The Entity and Poltergeist as well. I was still interested in ghost stories.
Entity. Why does that one sound familiar?
The Entity. That was based on a true story, apparently, about a woman who sort of gets repeatedly raped by a ghost.
I remember hearing something about that.
It's pretty full on. But yes, ghost stories I was still interested in to a degree, but I guess I was sort of starting to lean more towards things like Bad Taste and Society, Evil Dead. You know, more the blood and guts, stalk and slash cinema, I guess. Mm-hmm. Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a revelation for me. Lucio Fulci movies.
Oh,
Big Fulci fan. And you know, having more video nights with your friends as well. You know, alcohol starting to come into the picture, and you know, it's a party atmosphere. Cannibal Holocaust, Cannibal Ferox.
20th anniversary of that recently. No, did you?
Yes, the Holocaust. Yeah. A big thing for me was the fact that in the UK we went through the video nasty debacle, and the DPP 39 list, or the prosecutor.
The 139 list?
Basically, DPP 39. It was basically a list of the banned movies, the movies that you weren't meant to be watching or have or sell or trade. That became a shopping list for me, basically. So.
That which is advertised as "you cannot have this" is what you must have.
Thanks for putting them all in a list for me.
Exactly. Yeah.
I know, right? These are the absolute worst, most depraved films ever. This is where you can find them, and they're awful. Do not watch them. Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I made it like a real goal to try and collect as many of those as I could. And you'd have to do it via snail mail in those days. That's pre-internet. So you couldn't find anything online. You couldn't download anything. So it was all, you know, finding adverts in the back of horror magazines and sending letters to people, making phone calls and trading horribly bootlegged VHS. You know, the kind of thing you can barely see through the snow.
Or did you ever get one of the copies that has like what is it? It's recorded from television, and they actually leave the commercials on there. Sometimes fast forwarded. I don't know how it would happen. I guess if they have a dual recorder, but sometimes they would fast forward through the commercials at least, but they would leave the commercials on there still.
Yeah, that happened a few times actually, which was always annoying because then you knew it wasn't uncut. If it had been recorded from the TV at some point. Yeah. Well, yeah, no, they were great days with the VHS trading and so just collecting things like Cannibal Holocaust, and that's how I found Necromantic as well, the York Buttsguy movie. That was originally, it wasn't on the list. It was banned in the UK, but it wasn't a part of the DPP 39 list. But one of my traders basically said, you know, this German movie, the guy who's real corpses.
Your dealer.
What? My dealer, yeah.
My guy.
My dealer, this guy. Oh, and he was great because he was a Scouse dwarf. So he had a Liverpudlian accent. He was from Liverpool. And he was a dwarf, and he dealt with these videos from the back of his car. His catchphrase was "clear as a bell, mate." Yeah, clear as a bell, because he'd say, "Is it good quality? Is it watchable? Clear as a bell, mate." And they never were. They were always
advertised as, but not actually.
Never actually watched any of them.
I doubt he did.
Tippy toppy.
Never get high on your own supply.
Oh yeah,
So you said you were still interested in ghost stories at that point. You were starting to get into blood and guts. We kind of already talked about what interested you in the ghost stories. What interested you in the blood and guts stuff?
I was definitely this. I guess more the body horror aspect. It was more. It seems more grounded, when it's a human being taken apart.
Are we talking body horror like Cronenberg style, like not necessarily violence, but actual transmogrification of flesh and things, like supernatural molding of flesh?
Yeah, like Society.
Yes.
Brian Newton movie. Yeah, that kind of thing. That was awesome. That fascinated me. I think even the stuff that when it sort of changes, physiologically changes the bodies of the people it inhabits.
Yeah, that was the same for me. Around the same age was one of the first things around adolescence that I had seen that involved body horror was the stuff, and I just remember it being deeply unsettling at the time, but I didn't even remember the specific images. And I went back and rewatched it recently, and the scene where the guy's mouth opens up really wide, and the dog. It's very impressive special effects too.
That's the one. Yeah. And then you've got the Thing, of course, as well. And talk about body horror.
That was just the birth of an entirely new era of body horror. Not to discredit anyone like David Cronenberg, but there was nothing like the Thing before the Thing. Except for Who Goes There. And I think the story that Who Goes There was based off of. The Thing is not the original Thing, apparently.
Yeah. I'm with you.
So you said body horror?
Yeah, body horror. And then I guess later teenage years. And this links in with the video nasties list because they had Faces of Death on there. But then, sort of seeking out documentaries and the Mondo movies, which I think every teenage boy has done at some point, especially now with the internet. So the realities of very real physical horror.
Did you also feel cheated when you discovered that Faces of Death was 90% not real?
Yeah. Yes, I hope.
Despite being scared at the time.
Yeah, I guess it did produce the desired effect at the time, so better to find out in retrospect than beforehand. There's that.
What do you mean my placebo worked?
But I mean, at the time, I just took it at face value. When they sprinkle in there, abattoir scenes and the occasional aircraft disaster.
Some of it was real.
It's cleverly done, really.
It was art.
You mentioned that
it was kind of.
You mentioned that the body horror was more grounded. What do you mean by that?
Like in physicality, I guess. So it's not, something in the shadows that may or may not be happening as far as this supernatural. The intangible is more, this is your body, this is what it can do.
Yeah.
So it's more of a fear of this could really happen.
Yeah.
Not that it could really happen, like someone's body can be morphed and twisted like that, like vicissitude or something, but I think the thing about body horror is that it hits home in that way, that it's not something, an animal attacking someone else and destroying their body, or explosion or gunfights or something like that. It's someone's body being twisted, so it almost empathically makes you feel that because it's happening to the human body. So that's the horror of it, is that the body is being
you can identify
it
with it more.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. It's the empathy. Yeah.
So you still had some friends, I guess, then in your teenage years that were still watching this stuff with you. Did you have like a core group of friends who were interested in horror, or was it just that you had friends and you also watched horror?
More that I had friends who also watched horror. I don't think there was anybody as freakily obsessive about horror as I was. They'd sort of come to me and say, "What have you got for us this week, Martin?"
I can relate.
Yeah. But most of the movie nights we had, I would tend to monopolise, I guess. But they were quite happy with it, I don't think I scarred too many young lives that I know of. Just my own.
Yeah. Did you have any Any scary dreams as a teen? I think you said no. You only had the ones as the child, and then nothing before or since. You said
No, no. I mean, occasionally, and it still happens occasionally, I get the psychopomp thing, where you're sort of in and out of the dream stage. More sleep paralysis, I guess. That happens. That happened right through teenage years, and still happens occasionally, but not as much as it used to.
I used to get that a lot in my mid-20s for some reason, but and since then it calmed down.
I've never gotten the sleep paralysis. I've had the hypnic jerks where you for a split second feel like you're falling and you wake up instantly, but I have yet to experience sleep paralysis, and from what I've heard, I should count myself lucky because it is a terrifying thing to wake up and just not be able to move.
Yeah. From what I understand, it's like your body is in the process of waking up, but something about the process gets misaligned, so your mind actually gets to be conscious before the rest of your body is ready to let you reassert control, basically.
Running parallel to that, when it happens to me, is that I do get the feeling of somebody else in the room as well. That sort of remained, I guess, from childhood.
For me, it was more. I felt like somebody must be holding me down, and in retrospect, the only thing I can think of is I must have come to that conclusion because I couldn't move. Like that must have just been the only logical thing that my brain could. Somebody must be holding me down because I can't move.
Yeah,
and then as I got to be more awake, and it kept happening, I realized it's not that someone is holding me down because I can't move at all. And if there was a person holding me down, I'd at least be able to move somewhat. And then again, 20s, not knowing a whole lot, and not even knowing that at the time I didn't even know sleep paralysis was a thing. So then I start going thinking to myself, shit, are demons real? Is there something supernatural keeping me from moving? And eventually they just went away on their own, and it was like 10 years later that I read about sleep paralysis, and I was like, holy shit, thank God.
Right. Good. There weren't invisible demons in my room holding me down.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's another thing is like with sleep paralysis, when your body's paralyzed, I don't know if it's a fight or flight thing or maybe it's just an instinct thing. Your body not being in a normal state, being paralyzed and just not the normal run of the mill business. I think the first defensive thing that you subconsciously think is there someone in the room?
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, no doubt.
Did you have anything that actually terrified you in real life as a teen?
Like near-death experiences or anything?
Yeah, I was hit by a car once, which wasn't fun.
No, I imagine not.
Yeah, sort of running to catch a bus after school, I think, and I was following a friend, blind leading the blind. I just ran out into the road with him, and a car had just slammed into me. He was okay; he got over first, but me being the wheezy asthmatic was trying to keep up with him and couldn't quite keep up. And yeah, I just remember seeing the car, and then apparently it hit my legs, and my head hit the bonnet. I went over the car, and it had been raining, so I skidded a few meters on my face on the tarmac. And I sort of came to, and there was a lot of people around me, and all I remember is sort of sitting up and everyone saying, "Don't move, don't move."
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And my first instinct was just to say, "It's all right, my dad works at the hospital." I'll be all right. Point me in the right direction. I'm off.
Right.
Well, yeah, I don't think it did. It was pretty scary, really, but it didn't do any real damage, I don't think. Well, saying that, years later I've developed a back issue, but I think that may be connected.
Well, maybe it was because you didn't see it coming, and like the whole thing about how drunk drivers never seem to get injured in crashes because they go ragdoll limp. You didn't see it coming, you didn't tense up, so you miraculously...
I suspect he saw it coming at the last second.
Yeah. You did say you saw the car, so yeah.
I have a memory of seeing the car right there.
So were they not even coming to a stop or trying to stop? They were just going full force?
Yeah, just going full force. I think actually hearing back afterwards, they'd gone through a red light as well.
Oh man!
There was a crossing a little bit further down, which in a school zone.
Okay, wait. They ran a red light and they were speeding in a school zone. Were they drinking
and hit a child.
And were they drinking too?
I don't know. I didn't even see the guy afterwards.
Okay, wait, was it hit and run? Did he take off?
No. Apparently the police had spoken to him and he was a bit shaken up. And yeah, I didn't really get all the details. My father probably got all the details. But yeah, that's the only near death experience.
Anything else that legitimately terrified you? And if not, that's fine. We just have the questions in case they.
Yeah, I don't think so. Okay. Teenage years, no.
How about Halloween as a teen?
Halloween as a teen didn't really happen.
No,
I don't recall any Halloween memories as a teen. I mean, I guess it would just be another excuse for a movie night round at my house.
So is it that you don't remember it, or that you didn't celebrate it?
More that I don't remember it, I think, because I still kind of celebrate it in a way. So I'd imagine that would have been a constant. But yeah, I don't remember.
Certain activities when you're a teenager prevent memory and remember things.
That's it. Alcohol and weed happened.
That might have had something to do with it. So did the things that scared you, did they cause you to change your behavior at all in any way? Maybe looking both ways before you cross the road?
No.
Not trusting a red light?
Use the crossing. Yeah. No, I don't think my behaviour's changed at all during that time.
All right, so I guess to summarize the teenage years then, you were starting to get into the body horror and the blood and guts. Had you already started drawing by this time?
Yes. I mean, I always drew, and even as a child, actually the same guy that went to the Haunted Inn with me at the Wax Museum, we used to draw comic books together through school, and that carried on into teenage years.
Were they horror themed?
Yeah, Ghostbusters. we used to draw Ghostbusters comics, but with more of a horror tangent. Yeah, I think he's still got them all, actually.
That is awesome. Your friend still has comics that you and him drew as a child.
Yeah. He sent me a couple of pictures not so long ago. But yeah, going into teenage years, my drawings were getting a little bit more graphic, I guess, and I remember at one point my mother being quite worried that
the teacher called home. Martin's been drawing some strange things in the art class.
And at one point, it was like, she'd never stop me from drawing, but I do recall a conversation where she said, "You need to stop doing that."
Just don't do it in public, because I'm tired of getting the phone calls. Like, I don't care if you draw fucked up things like decapitated bodies, but just not at the school,
Just don't have them out like love letters.
They were love letters. This one was a love letter to my teacher. That's why it was the lady who was skewered on Cannibal Holocaust.
That's why I'm holding her things in half.
Well, I hope she at least appreciates your career being what it is now.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. I've been lucky in that I've managed to make something of it all.
Yes, you have.
Moving on to adult years then, what were some of the scary stories or books or movies that have really influenced you as an adult or been really memorable?
I guess as an adult, I mean, the reading material definitely changed. It was more, sort of serial killer books as opposed to Stephen King stories, sort of factual things. There's one book I have which I don't force it on friends, but it's a pretty grim book called The Eyes by Alberto Ignacio something or other. It's basically a series of short stories that this guy was a big fan of de Sade, and he wrote these sort of mini confessions into his stories, and they are incredibly sick, twisted stories. And even at the back of the book, he's got his own pornoglossia, he calls it, which is a series of words and their associations to him. It's just the most disturbing thing I've ever read. So that's more the kind of reading I've done as an adult.
Did you say it was called The Eyes, like EYES, or The Ides, like The Ides of March?
As in eyeballs, The Eyes. I made Phil Stevens read it, and he thanks me. So. But yeah, that was pure nightmare fodder. and I've sort of brought parts of that into my own writing as well. But yeah, movies. I really enjoy the Japanese and Korean ghost movies still, because they do it the best. Like The Ring and One Miss Call and Grudge and all that kind of
was
thing.
that one recently, The Wailing?
I've not seen that.
I've heard good things, and I've heard it's very good. It's Korean, I think, isn't it?
The Wailing.
Something about that's pretty topical right now. I think it's a woman who moves into town and starts to spread a virus. It's I believe the virus is actually like some form of zombie virus, and it turns people into zombies, or maybe people just start dying. I think.
What's that have to do with wailing?
Something like the wailing of people that are dying. You can hear them off in the background.
Oh, that kind of wailing.
Or...
I'm thinking like the animal. I'm like,
no, not like whale watching Reykjavik Massacre wailing.
Like you're harvesting them for blubber. I mean, like not likely in Korea. America, maybe.
Or Japanese.
No, I'm talking about Americans being fat blubber.
Oh. Huh.
Yeah, I'll need to watch that one.
So, serial killer books, The Eyes, The Ring.
Yeah. But yeah, and then of course I got more into the sort of underground indie extreme movies, which is where I'm drawn to and where I get most of my work, which is a blessing for me. But yeah, Marion Dora movies, can't get enough of those. And you get into things like your August Underground and Gateway Meats and No Holds Barred, disturbing movies. I'm a big fan of now.
So, just out of curiosity, you mentioned underground indie movies and things like that. So, how did you go from the mainstream stuff in your teenage years to the underground stuff in your adult years? What drove you in that direction, or called out to you, shall we say?
Well, I guess as your brain and experiences develop over the years, your tastes change. You become a little bit more cynical. Start stiff-arming anything that might be irrelevant or not appealing. I mean, I still watch mainstream movies. I've got a real fear now of home invasion movies, especially, or anything to do with kids terrifies me as well. Like Eden Lake, or there's one called Cherry Tree Lane. Funny Games, of course.
Or I think there's one just called The Children, which is an odd movie where all the kids get like a zombie virus, but it's more like a rage virus, but it only affects those that haven't gone into puberty yet. So all the children just turn against their parents and kill them.
That's another one I need to see. I'm making a note of that one. Yeah, but I guess, I mean, you do, in a sense, it's unavoidable that you become slightly desensitized by repeated viewing of the same kind of thing.
I was going to say, I think that's why you would go into indie films, is because you're looking for more of that, the more extreme gore kind of thing.
Yeah, and just the fact that they've got no studios to answer to, and they can just express their art freely, and I know myself. I've recently started to understand the reasons why I gravitate towards that kind of movie.
Do tell.
Yes. Elaborate.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess for me personally, I know this isn't a therapy session, but for me personally, I did have mental health issues as a teenager and growing up, and anxiety and social anxiety, and having talked to one of my many shrinks, I've figured out that basically what I do personally is I try and block out negatives, because I don't want that feeling of anxiety or worry, or I don't want to invite misery into my life, basically.
So you watch horror movies?
I know, right?
It makes sense. There's a point. He's getting to it.
I know. I just had to make the joke. Sorry, continue.
So yeah, I guess I've developed this defense mechanism where I block out negatives, where I don't allow myself to feel it. But that has a knock-on effect whereby it's going to block out positives as well. So
it's like subconscious lithium.
positive feelings and experiences. Yeah. You can't sort of suppress one without suppressing the other emotion. And what the extreme horror in particular does for me is that it forces me to feel something. It's a safe space for a start. These things are happening on the screen. It's not happening in real life. So the fight or flight thing, subconsciously, it kicks in a little bit. But it's more that because these things are so extreme and graphic and not meant to be viewed as fun, and hopefully not something you'll encounter in your daily life, that it elicits that sort of rarefied feeling of terror, of being scared. And so, yeah, that's my draw to it. I think is that when I'm watching movies, they can be beautiful movies. They don't necessarily have to be completely gory. They excite me in a way that life doesn't, I guess.
So does that mean that how can I say this? So is it all movies that affect you this way, or just horror, or just it's all movies but horror more than like the effect is greater?
Yeah, I guess the effect is more refined with horror movies. But I do like normal movies too. I do get that feeling from well-made romance comedies or sci-fi movies. I get excited for the new Star Wars movie as much as the next person. But it's more rarefied and refined with the horror, and that's been a constant throughout my life. So that's where I go. That's my safe space.
Think of it this way: if horror is the orange flavor of food, you can get a little bit of orange flavor in something like orange duck or a dish cooked with orange peels in it. But if you really want orange flavor, you drink orange juice.
Yes, precisely.
Analogies. I got it.
It's interesting because and I don't know if you and I had talked about this at all, but part of the reason that Chris and I are a good team for this podcast is
he's the head shrink on the horror.
Yeah, basically. I don't have any training per se, but I've also gone through years of therapy and 12-step program stuff, and even long before that, even as a kid, I was always fascinated with understanding why people do the things they do. And in part of my journey, which I eventually then wrote a book, and this is included in the book, I learned that, or realized that early in my childhood, I wasn't allowed to be angry from a very early age. And then somewhere in my teenage years, something happened where I then was no longer allowed to be very happy either. And so I kind of clamped a lid down on all those emotions. And also from an early age, I wasn't allowed to really be very sad too much either, at least not outwardly. And so as an adult, I then had to learn how to allow myself to experience these emotions and basically say, fuck you, fuck the world. The people who were blocking me from doing this, one of them is dead, and I don't give a shit about him. And, to give myself the permission to participate in these emotions. I went through this, like a 6-month period in each of them, because I didn't realize both of them at the same time. The first one was the happiness, I think I realized first, and then later picked up on the anger part of it. And so for the happiness, for example, the door swung completely open, and I would catch myself being much louder when I laughed and much more open with my humor than I had when I was younger. And there were these self-conscious moments where previously, and this was the trigger that made me realize it, was there were times where I'd be out with my friends and I'd be laughing and I'd get self-conscious and I'd shut down. And trying to work that through in my head and go and ask myself, why am I shutting down like that? That's where I realized, my stepfather made fun of me that one time, and so I stopped laughing after that. And And it was that process of unlearning it that, okay, then I opened the door, and there were times that I caught myself. I was self-conscious. Well, not that I caught myself. I was self-conscious. I realized that I was laughing way louder than I normally would have. But at that moment, I then gave myself permission to say, you know what? It's okay that I do this. I'm letting myself do this. I want to do this. And it was like a 6-month arc, shall we say, of the door swinging open way wider than it probably should have, and then me kind of bringing you back a little bit and getting to what's probably a normal amount, socially speaking. And then, like a year later, I had the same realization with anger. And so it's interesting to hear you say that this may have been related to a defense mechanism for you, where maybe you weren't allowing yourself to feel things. So maybe this was like you say, a safe place for you to do so.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Or as Chris likes to say, interdasting.
Interdasting.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense to me too.
Yeah. This may be the easiest call that we've had so far, because you already came knowing knowing the what it was for you. I mean, every other call, that's the challenge is to try to figure out, what is the driving thing.
Well, to be truthful, for years and years, I've not known the reason. I've not known why, and it took various traumas along the way to finally figure out why, which has only happened over the last year, I'd say, really.
Yeah.
I've put a finger on it.
Well, I'm glad that you've been able to.
Me too. I don't feel quite so weird anymore.
Right.
Yeah. And resolution and what's the word? Solvency is always a good thing.
Well,
because you do get asked very often, why are you watching this? What do you get?
And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to do this podcast, is because, to be a little blunt about it, from the point of view of the mainstream world, I mean, a lot of the people who are into this kind of thing, the rest of the world looks at you and goes, what the hell is fucking wrong with you? Depending on how deep you are into it. But, knowing a number of people who do like this stuff, people are people. There's, I can't remember the phrase, but they're like, I think it's the Shinto religion, that's something about, there's nothing evil in nature, and this stuff is natural. I mean, it has to be natural because it's happening to people. If it wasn't natural, it wouldn't be happening at all. So coming to understand what it is that's going on, and allowing maybe the rest of the world to come to understand, hey, these are normal people going through normal things, and it just happens to point them in this direction that,
Yeah. And these normal, so-called normal people, especially with the internet now, the real violence is just presented in such a cavalier manner. That's what disturbs me. That's what upsets me. That kids are posting videos online of other kids being beaten up, and there's a lot of real death stuff online as well, which is too easily accessed, I think. And but that's okay for them. They can share that online with their friends, and be proud of the fact they kick the crap out of some poor autistic boy.
Yeah. Well, there's that. There's also people who have different. I don't want to use the word fetishes, because although that's true too. There are certain. I mean, let's mention fetishes first. So there are fetishes that some people are so strongly attracted to that they can't find gratification through any other means, and so that's another group of the population that has to struggle with fitting into the rest of the world. There's also people who don't necessarily have a fetish in terms of like a foot fetish or a whatever fetish, but for example, Chris, I think, even made a joke earlier before we started the call about polyamory. That's something that's extremely, if that's what makes you happy, it's extremely hard to find a loving relationship, and a lasting one, that can accommodate that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are a lot of things in this world that we as human beings find ourselves into that, as you say, some of the things are permitted by society, like, throwing up videos of people fighting, and some things are not. It's kind of ridiculous who gets to say what's acceptable and what's not, but we don't have any control over that. All we can do is talk about it and say, we're not that weird. Although I'm saying I'm not, I almost don't want to say this, but I'm not really the big horror fan of the three of us. Chris is the horror fan. I'm more the psychological guy.
I'm sorry, what? I've been distracted. I was watching Peter Jackson put his brains back in his head.
Case in point. Case in point.
That's so Chris. What's wrong with you, Chris?
So
nothing, and that's the point.
Some of these questions we don't even really need to go through at this point, but just for the sake of going through them, I guess let's run through a couple more. Have you continued participating in Halloween as an adult?
Only in as much as I have young children now. So yeah, I like them to participate. So I'm vicariously participating in Halloween. Okay. Yeah.
Any especially enjoyable memories regarding your children's Halloweens so far?
Not especially, I guess. I mean, just the regular excitement that children have about, getting candy from strangers.
Right.
I mean, when you put it that way.
But they do like dressing up. They found a box of some of my old dressing up things, which included a Freddy Krueger Leatherface mask. And they got a real kick out of running around wearing those.
Oh, I wanted to ask you about that. I thank you for reminding me. You had mentioned, when you mentioned Texas Chainsaw, you used the word a revelation, and I wanted to ask you to explain what you meant by that. In so much
as the film itself, the subject matter, because I knew it was based on the Ed Gein story, it seemed so well done to me. And the pathos you feel towards Leatherface himself, as Toby Hooper puts it, he's just a regular guy that had a really bad day. And the fact that there's minimal blood in the movie, there's no gore whatsoever.
Yeah.
But you sort of remember afterwards, you sort of remember you fill in the gaps, you think, oh no, he chainsawed that guy in half and there was blood and guts everywhere. And there really wasn't. A lot of it's implied.
There's maybe dried blood over things, but you're right, there's no actual active blood in Texas Chainsaw.
That's it, and the whole sort of charnel house atmosphere, and the fact it pretty much was at the time an indie movie.
Yeah.
A shoestring budget.
Well, you mentioned specifically the word revelation. What was revealed to you?
I guess because you could make a movie like that with such a low budget and tell that story without excessive blood and gore. And I know for a long time I'd heard of the movie and I couldn't get hold of it because it was one of the banned movies in the UK. So receiving a bootleg of that movie, I was elated at the time when I got that, and I sat down. I think I watched it 3 times in a row. Just kept rewinding the tape and watching it again. It just blew me away like no other film had for a very long time. It probably it elicited that feeling that I look for subconsciously, and it's probably one of my most watched movies, full stop. I revisit that.
Would you say it's the film that you've watched more times than any other film?
Yeah, that's a tough one, isn't it? I'd say it's definitely up there. Yeah, it's definitely up there. And The Exorcist I've watched 1,000 times, I think. Cannibal Holocaust.
Is that just thinking about horror movies, or is that across all movies?
Probably more so horror, because I revisit quite often Jaws. That's one of my favourite movies. I guess that's kind of horror still, isn't it, though? I love the movie Quadrophenia, the Who movie. I revisit that fairly often. And The Elephant Man is my all-time favourite movie, so I'd say that's the one I've watched more than any other, thinking about it. Probably The Elephant Man, with Nail and Iron.
Out of curiosity, why is that one your favourite?
I saw it at a really young age, and and the empathy I had towards John Merrick. It's just a really moving story, and it's beautifully made, beautifully acted. The soundtrack is just everything about the movie is perfect for me.
Okay.
And I could literally just pop that on at any time and sit through it. It never gets old.
That kind of ties in with some of the things that we were talking about. I was thinking to myself, that question is towards the end of our interviews as an opportunity to, as we interview people, sometimes the movie that they have watched more times than any other is not a horror movie. Like, for example, for me, it was Monty Python's Search for the Holy Grail.
Yes.
But knowing that there's this other movie that doesn't fit into horror that is their most watched movie sometimes gives you a little bit of an insight into something that you may not have understood if you hadn't asked that question.
I don't know. I think it might be a horror movie. It's David Lynch.
What's
yeah, you could.
No,
oh, you're talking about Elf.
I never actually seen it. I sit down and watch this film one of these days.
Well,
I know.
Well, what I was thinking is, as I'm listening to what he said, the thing that he touched on was the empathy towards Merrick, which ties in with what we had talked about earlier about the defense mechanism and being able to allow himself to feel certain emotions. So empathy might be one of those emotions. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean that's one of the things that we all love of cinema or storytelling or any kind of entertainment as such is that it spawns, for lack of a better term, emotions in you that are usually, I don't know, dormant, just going through life. We're almost programmed, for lack of a better term again, to quell emotions, to just get through the day and get the thing done. You don't worry about emotions. You go sometimes it gets to the point where you go watch things, entertain yourself with stories and cinema and movies, and that way you're almost imbibing that emotion like it was a meal of some sort.
Yeah.
So 2 last questions really here. We can skip some of the other ones. Do you see any common threads about what kind of horror you like? Cannibalism, body horror, occult, metaphysical, ghost stories you mentioned? It sounded like the 2 main ones were ghost stories and body horror.
Yeah, I guess they are. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's probably the most common thread would be the body horror.
Good combination.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the last question, we were just talking a minute ago about, your favorite movies and, for example, empathy and some of these movies allowing you to feel things. And so the last question though is then why horror specifically? Because, there are all kinds of different genres that, for example, elicit emotions. But you seem to have a thing for horror. Do you know why it is that you prefer horror over other genres that might elicit those same reactions?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it ties back into this this sort of fight or flight safe space. I think that's at a primal level. That's probably a more ready and natural emotion that everybody has. But because of the circumstances I mentioned before, I think that being such a powerful emotion, I do get a kick out of it. I get a kick out of being allowed to feel that, and that you can only really find in horror or possibly a really good drama.
That's true. Where I was thinking of going with this, it might just be a social thing. I mean, let's face it. It's for a guy to be a fan of rom-coms is not,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, The Graduate is one of my favourite movies.
What's that?
The Graduate is one of my favourite movies.
It's classic
rom-com. But yeah, you're right, there's a big social aspect. I mean, especially for me with what I do with the art and everything as well.
That was the other thing I was thinking too, is you mentioned, safe space, but I was thinking your art, how can I say this? Just to use rom-com as an example again, you could have gotten into comic book work that, there were, I'm trying to think what the heck the names of them were, but like the old Gold Key comics and Valiant, Prince Valiant, and there's a whole area of comic art that is classical, for a better lack of a better word.
Yeah, you could have been a sad sack writing Family Circus in the Sunday paper.
Yeah.
You could have, but where I was going with this is it just so happened that the things that you were watching is that then what you wound up drawing, and it almost kind of becomes a symbiotic thing, because the things that you get better at drawing are the things that you wind up being hired to do, you know?
Yeah. That is a huge part of why I do it, I think. So it's all encompassing for me. It's
Practice makes perfect.
yeah, it's not just that I sit down and watch horror movies, but then I sit down and I draw pictures of the horrible things I've just seen on screen. And other people get to see them and enjoy them.
Yes.
Yeah, but there's a pretty big horror community out there, and I didn't like to feel part of something.
Yeah. That was one of the questions we skipped. Actually, was are you part of any kind of social organization related to your horror stuff now, or do you, as an adult, do you have a group of friends who are horror fans?
Yeah. There's a couple of people locally that are horror fans that share that with me. But it's more, because I'm not from Australia. I moved here a few years ago. It's at a time in my life where it's pretty hard to go out and network face to face. So, the internet has been my crutch since I've been out here, and I've met a lot more people via Facebook and online.
Yeah, if you got kids, the internet is a handy thing because you can be doing what you got to do with the kids, and then, like I said,
yeah, exactly.
jump online, and you can't
kids or a busy job of some kind, or not too much free time in general anymore.
Or like Chris, you work odd hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's an odd man.
But, it's kind of a similar answer. The adult horror running crew as it is usually more often digital these days. It's how I met you, Martin, and Anthony and Phil.
Yeah.
So, I guess to summarize the call, then you did.
Sounds like you generally liked horror.
That's what I was scrolling back up to look at the childhood, and so other than the one movie that scared him as a child,
Which everyone has. And that dude got lit on fire. Like, perfect stranger. He was just taking pictures of a woman. Fucking lit him on fire. Anyone would be afraid of that shit.
particularly a child.
Yeah.
A 6-year-old child, yeah.
But other than that,
Generally good experience.
Yeah, it's probably, monopolized a great deal of my life to this point.
Yeah, you could say so. All right, well, yeah, it's been a blast, man. Thank you for being here, Martin. And
yeah, thank you.
Once again, if anybody wants to check out any of the awesome artwork of Martin Trafford, you can find that out at, is it just traffart.com or martintraffart.com?
On Facebook, it's just Traffart. And
Okay.
on Instagram is, Martin Traffart.
We're going to put together a bio page for you on the Horror Makes Us Happy website, and we can link to whatever you want there.
Awesome, yeah.
All right, well, thank you once again, and thank you to anyone out there listening, and please do come visit us at horrormakesushappy.com. We have a schedule posted there to see who we're going to be interviewing next, as well as the people we'd like to interview, so if you do know anyone on that list or can get us in contact with anyone, just give us a drop us a line, that thing, or otherwise just pop by the site and let us know how we're doing. horrormakesushappy.com.